Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 23 of Women's Wrestling Focus, brought to you by SEScoops and hosted by me, Ella J of a Wrestling Gal podcast. Now, today we are here to talk about two upcoming matchups taking place next Saturday at Elimination Chamber from Saudi Arabia. And of course, WWE is bringing back the return of the Women's Elimination Chamber, along with an intriguing Raw Women's Championship match between Big Time Bex and a WWE Hall of Famer. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. Now, WWE is returning to Saudi Arabia next Saturday, February 19th, for the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. And of course, we have not one, but two women's matches on the card that I'm really excited for. Of course, one of them being a Raw Women's Championship match, and of course, the return of the Women's Elimination Chamber. Now, let's talk about this Elimination Chamber first. So, it was revealed this past week that WWE will be holding the first Women's Elimination Chamber since 2020, and it'll end up being the fourth overall in the company's history. And so, this year, 6 competitors will be locked inside the grueling structure to earn a championship opportunity at the Raw Women's Championship. So, whoever wins this Elimination Chamber will walk out as the number one contender for the Raw Women's Championship. And of course, WWE revealed 5 out of the 6 competitors competing in this Elimination Chamber matchup, leaving one spot open, which we'll talk about in a second. But to quickly go over who has been announced, of course, we have former SmackDown Women's Champion Bianca Belair. We have former Raw Women's Champions Rhea Ripley and also Nikki ASH. Of course, we have Doudrop, who just competed at the Royal Rumble. And of course, we have Liv Morgan, who has also competed for the Raw Women's Championship in the last month, last competing at day 1. And so you have a lot of women on the Raw roster right now competing in this matchup, but that does leave one spot open. And so, of course, first right off of the bat, you could use some in-house options like an Alexa Bliss. You also have Dana Brooke, Tamina, or either of the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions, Carmella or Zelina Vega. But considering they're leaving this last spot open, it might be more sensible that it might be a surprise entrant. Now, there was a lot of speculation going into the Royal Rumble that there might be some surprise returns from the main roster right now. Of course, we saw a lot of legends in the Royal Rumble, but there really wasn't any surprises of like modern day or current roster talent. And so there's definitely 3 glaring possibilities as to who could fulfill this 6th and final spot. And one of them being somebody who was heavily rumored and even reported to be returning at the Royal Rumble, which somehow still didn't happen, is former Raw and SmackDown and WWE Women's Tag Team Champion Asuka. So Asuka has not been seen since Money in the Bank last year, I believe. So it's been a good about 6-7 months since we have last seen Asuka in a WWE ring and on television. She was reported out dealing with an injury, but perhaps if she's cleared, she might be the most viable option. So she's definitely been missing in action and definitely missed on Monday Night Raw. And I think Asuka could potentially be the perfect person to fulfill this 6th and final spot. But also you have 2 other possibilities. Of course, you could also have the returning Bayley, who unfortunately before Money in the Bank sustained a knee injury, which was reported to keep her out for 6 to 9 months. And so now about this point, it's been a little over 6 months, leading on 7 now. So it's possible she could be returning. She was left undrafted, much like Asuka during the WWE draft. And so this might be a sign that either of them could be joining Monday Night Raw roster. And of course, lastly, though, you do have one other possibility, one other strong possibility, I should say. Another one is Lacey Evans, who much like Bayley and Asuka, was left undrafted during the WWE draft. So none of those three currently have a home on the main roster, whether it's the blue or the red brand. Lacey Evans is on a different case, though, because she was on maternity leave after just giving birth a couple months ago, after last year announcing around February that she was pregnant, but now her baby is born, and so maybe an in-ring return is in her near future. Again, those are three very viable options to fulfill the last slot. I would be shocked if it was somebody else. But like I said, it's also possible we could be getting some in-house options from the current Raw roster that has not been inserted into this matchup as of yet. But let's talk about the competitors who are actually in this matchup for a moment. So, like I said, 5 out of the 6 competitors have been confirmed for the Women's Elimination Chamber #1 contendership match, including Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, Nikki ASH, Liv Morgan, and Doudrop. And out of all of the competitors in there, Liv Morgan is actually the only one with prior chamber experience. She did compete in the first ever WWE Women's Tag Team Championship match to crown the inaugural champions back at Elimination Chamber 2019. Unfortunately, she did fall short in teaming with Sarah Logan, but she does have an advantage because she did last a pretty long time, if I recall correctly. So perhaps she can utilize that prior experience to her advantage. Again, the Elimination Chamber is one of those unforgiving structures, as it's been called before, and you never truly walk out the same, as so I hear. So perhaps she could utilize that to her advantage. But also in this matchup, we also have 3 former big champions in WWE. You have Bianca Belair, who was the SmackDown Women's Champion last year. And of course, you have Rhea Ripley and Nikki ASH, who are former tag team partners who have now split ways, but they are both also former Raw Women's Champions. So you have some formidable opponents in here. And of course, Doudrop also just competed at Royal Rumble. She did fall short, but she did beat Liv Morgan and Bianca Belair to become the #1 contender to earn a shot at the Royal Rumble. So she does have a win over 2 of the competitors in this matchup itself. But again, going into Elimination Chamber is a whole other ballgame. So there's definitely some strong opponents in this matchup. And of course, that 6th spot is still open. Personally, I think there's 2 options you could go here. As of right now, the picture for Becky Lynch going into WrestleMania is unclear. I think one of 2 possibilities is to regain Bianca Belair's momentum and have her win Elimination Chamber to kind of have a callback to this SummerSlam match that we had last year where she was defeated in 26 seconds, and that story is already built in going into WrestleMania against Becky Lynch, assuming Becky Lynch retains at Elimination Chamber, which we'll get to in a moment. But honestly, Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair, I think, would have a lot of drawing power, especially since we have never really truly gotten to see them one-on-one with any outside interference, with any cheating, just a clean matchup. I don't think we have seen one-on-one, and now Bianca Belair is ready. She's ready to compete. She's ready to get her revenge, her triumphant story, her comeback story against a crazy shocking loss at SummerSlam that left a lot of us speechless, including myself. So that's definitely one route. However, I do believe if Asuka is the one to return, Asuka also has kind of a storyline going on with Becky Lynch. Asuka was the one who was kind of granted the Raw Women's Championship in 2020 after she won Money in the Bank, and then Becky Lynch announced that she was leaving WWE because she was having a baby. And so she was kind of gifted this Raw Women's Championship from Becky Lynch there after winning Money in the Bank as kind of the prize for winning it. And so maybe there's something there. Those 2 kind of have a history. Maybe now Asuka kind of wants to go one-on-one. We've seen them go after each other before for on the SmackDown sides of things. But now to really go after the Raw Women's Championship, maybe there's something there with that. They could always make a call back to that too. So for me, I think the two viable options for Elimination Chamber is Bianca Belair, or if Asuka returns, possibly Asuka. However, I am leaning more towards Bianca Belair, but firstly, we have to get through a Raw Women's Championship match also slated for Elimination Chamber between Big Time Becky Lynch defending against WWE Hall of Famer Lita. And for the first time since 2006 at Survivor Series, Lita is competing for a championship in WWE. So almost 14 years later. It's absolutely insane to say that. But yes, for the first time in 14 years, Lita is competing for a championship in WWE. And of course, we saw the WWE Hall of Famer return for the Women's Royal Rumble and kind of confront SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte Flair. Ultimately, I do believe Lita made it to around the final 6 of the Women's Royal Rumble. She came in at number 26, ironically eliminated Mickie James, who defeated her at that Survivor Series for the WWE Women's Championship. But now she has shifted gears to challenge Big Time Bex at Elimination Chamber. We saw a couple weeks ago on Monday Night Raw, she challenged Big Time Bex, and of course Big Time Bex was not having it, but ultimately she eventually gave in and hesitantly accepted Lita's challenge, and so now these two will now go one-on-one at Elimination Chamber. But I think it should be noted that back in 2016, Lita was the one to present the first ever Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania that year, prior to the triple threat match between Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, and Sasha Banks. So it's even being said from the inception of the Raw Women's Championship that Lita presented that she's had her eye on it. I think that's kind of a cool full circle moment. Becky Lynch competed in that matchup at WrestleMania that year, and Lita was the one to present it. Ultimately, Charlotte Flair walked away with the championship that year, but it's still a really cool sentiment and a cool photo to look back on. And now we're getting a dream matchup considered by many. Becky Lynch grew up loving Lita, and so this is really a dream matchup for a lot of people, I think, of today's generation, and of course, like the Ruthless Aggression era. Lita is now back in WWE competing for a championship in 2022, and of course, she does say that she does have one more run left in her, so I'm super excited to see where could this go. Could this go beyond Elimination Chamber, even if Lita loses? Again, the direction for Becky Lynch going into WrestleMania right now is unclear because, as we did see on SmackDown, Ronda Rousey, the winner of the Women's Royal Rumble this year, is going after SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte Flair. So that leaves Becky Lynch right now without a WrestleMania opponent. But like we said, the winner of the Women's Elimination Chamber this year will go on to face whoever is the Raw Women's Champion, maybe at WrestleMania. We don't know yet. But however, we first do have to get through this Raw Women's Championship match between Lita and reigning defending champion Becky Lynch. And it's going to be good, assuming Becky Lynch does not use any cheating tactics like she has in weeks past. I think it's really going to be a cool quality matchup. I think Becky Lynch is going to be retaining here, however, but maybe Lita, if she's very true about this one more run, maybe we could see a championship on the WWE Hall of Famer Lita in 2022. Who knows? There's already been some big shocks this year in wrestling, so why not continue the trend and have Lita defy the odds, perhaps? But we'll see what happens. Like I said, coming up, Elimination Chamber is next Saturday on February 19th in Saudi Arabia. And of course, we have 2 women's matches, like I just said. There is still some time to maybe add a third. We don't know yet. There is no representation from the SmackDown sides of things right now. So we'll see what happens. But as of right now, those two matches stand. So, of course, too, let me know your predictions down below in the comments. Who do you think is going to be the final competitor in the Women's Elimination Chamber matchup this year? And who do you think is going to be walking away as the #1 contender? And also, what are your thoughts on Becky Lynch going one-on-one with WWE Hall of Famer Lita? It's going to be a wild afternoon next Saturday watching it. I'm excited. These are some really cool matchups, some dream matchups for a lot of people. There's a lot of possibilities in the Elimination Chamber, and of course, this is really Lita's first singles match in WWE since the first time since 2012, I believe, since Raw 1000, where she defeated Heath Slater. So it's been a long time, too, since we've had a one-on-one matchup with Lita in WWE, and so we're getting it this year. It feels like a dream. But like I said, let me know down below what you're thinking of the cards so far and your winners of the women's matches. And so for SEScoops, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for future content. And of course, on behalf of SEScoops, this is Ella J signing off on episode 23 of Women's Wrestling Focus.